The Barcode Podcast is presented by Titanium CPG Insurance. Titanium protects forward-thinking consumer brands with a range of commercial insurance products and risk management services designed specifically for natural and organic food and beverage companies. Learn more online at titaniumcpg.com. Welcome to the Barcode Podcast, where we equip emerging consumer brands. I'm your host, Ben Ponder, and at Barcode, we're here to give our listeners the knowledge and tools you need to thrive in the marketplace. And it's my pleasure today to welcome to the studio Jessica Honegger of Noonday Collection. Welcome, Jessica.
Thanks.
So glad you're here. And we're going to be talking about fashion and mission and design and integrating all of these things, team building. We're going to go in a lot of different directions. But before we do that, and again, you've been prepared for this, I want to hear about your favorite meal ever.
So that is a challenging question because there's nothing more that I love than to sit around the table and share a meal. But my husband and I started a tradition a couple years ago, and every Valentine's Day, we have a lobster dinner with our kids.
Nice.
Which is pretty funny because we're not from the East Coast.
Okay.
No
so
East Coast.
You have to source the lobster.
You have to source the lobster. Right. And we get out the china.
Okay.
Because we got beautiful wedding china that
that is often unused.
Never gets used.
That's right.
And we get out champagne glasses. Ooh. And we'll pour the sparkling grape juice for the kids.
Right.
And
a useful time to actually practice some etiquette for the kids.
It's a little etiquette, but it's just now it's got, meals can go so quickly with kids. I mean, gosh, they scarf stuff down. I've got two boys. I mean, really, meals can be about 5 minutes.
Absolutely. And they're like, can I be excused? Thanks.
But lobster requires some effort.
That's true.
So I really appreciate meals that involve almost this inactivity.
Right.
So you're actually...
Which is hard for a kid because especially if it's something you have to wait for. That's also really difficult.
It teaches a lot of things. It does. And it teaches kind of hunting for the...
Right.
It's messy.
You have to work for these bites.
You have to work for it. And even it's this juxtaposition of this like beautiful china and beautiful champagne flutes with this like kind of gritty, get in there, get that lobster.
Right.
out.
I love it. It's very primal in that way.
It's very primal.
Do the kids help at all with the preparation?
Well, Ben,
do they think they're helping?
that reckons me back to the time that we started this tradition.
Okay.
It did involve some tears.
Oh, yeah.
Because live lobsters.
Oh, yeah.
That you then put into a boiling pot of water.
Yeah. That's really tough.
There might have been a family member that was a little bit disturbed by that.
And you can't always predict that either. I have a kid who's very sensitive to that. They could watch a war movie, and if there's a dog suffering in the war movie, that's the thing that sends them over the edge.
Yeah.
So, you have to, sometimes you forget.
We forgot a little bit because we hunt in our family, we fish. So I was a little bit like, really, a lobster? This is what's going to seal the deal for you.
Yeah, it was Little Mermaid. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So,
but you know what? This person recovered, and we are all on board. We're all a lobster-loving family.
Oh, that's really good stuff.
In fact, I was planning a trip. I travel a lot for work, and my husband was like, "Babe, you can't be gone on that day next year because that's our Valentine's lobster family dinner."
That's
I was
awesome.
like, well, this is a well-established tradition. Wow.
So when your kids are older, this will be really interesting because they might have significant others who they're bringing and it's kind of a tryout in front of the whole family.
The lobster test.
That's right. Yeah. Do you know how to crack the lobster?
Do you even like lobster?
Do you like lobster? Gosh. That's right. So is it just straight lobster? Do you have a set menu that goes with the lobster? And are there any desserts?
We tend to just do strawberries covered in chocolate.
It's a red themed.
It's very
everything
red.
is red.
It is like all in Valentine's. Even the china that we pull out is it's pink.
Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect.
So we go all in. We've got roses. We've got champagne, and then everyone writes each other cards.
Oh, yeah. So that's really good because you're really trying to make a moment and a memory. And that's really crucial with your kids and kind of building those family together memories.
Yeah. It's awesome.
That's a great tradition. I love it. We need to figure out some derivation of that for our kids. That's a really good idea. So thank you
Well,
for
and then you
sharing
don't
that.
have to deal with all the what do you do for Valentine's, and it's such a weird holiday, and
It is.
yeah, so
Yeah.
we
That's a
made it
great
our
idea.
own.
That's a great idea. I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so let's transition. We're going to talk about Noonday Collection. And we're not going to do the typical long version of things, but I do want to make sure that just to level set, because again, this has been it's an awesome story, it's an awesome company, and I don't like to presume that everybody who's listening is familiar with every brand that we're talking about, because that may not be the case. So tell us the genesis, and I know for you that obviously you created the company to solve your own personal problem, right? So give us a little bit of the backstory, and then we're going to dive into some different parts of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Noonday Collection, we are a socially responsible fashion brand, and we're creating economic opportunity for artisans that live in vulnerable communities around the world that have often been outside of the typical marketplace, that haven't had access to the typical marketplace. And we create a marketplace for their really beautiful handmade goods. And we do that through social entrepreneurs across America, women that we call Noonday Collection ambassadors. And these are the women that are earning an income while also making an impact. And it's a well-established business now, but as you mentioned,
So how many years ago?
we are 9 years in.
Okay.
9 years in, have about 60 Austin employees, 2,000 Noonday ambassadors around the country, and 4,000 artisans around the world. And it's this beautiful ecosystem of relationships and of really empowering one another and leaning into one another during the good times and the bad. And it's really
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a dream. But it did start from a really challenging time in my husband and I's life, where we had been previously flipping houses in real estate, and AKA Chip and Joanna Gaines.
That's right.
Oh yeah. And the recession hit.
Yeah.
And we had decided to adopt internationally. We had 2 kids the old-fashioned way, but wanted to grow our family through adoption. And we began the process, which is expensive. And when we began the process, we had a little bit of a nest egg, and we thought, okay, that's going to pay for the international adoption process. But a few months in, the recession hit. We began living off fumes, couldn't close any of our deals. Suddenly, that little nest egg was paying for the groceries. But we didn't want to let a financial obstacle prevent us from growing our family through where we really felt like what we were supposed to do.
Right.
And I mean, we'd already even identified a child. And so I knew I needed to start some sort of side hustle.
It wasn't theory. You were already
We were there.
You were going there.
We were going there.
Yeah.
And so I knew I needed to start something. And previously, my husband and I had visited Uganda a few months before the recession hit. And some friends of ours that we knew through an organization we used to work for called Food for the Hungry International, they were living in Uganda to create entrepreneurial opportunities for Ugandans. Everything from bug repellent systems to maybe just a one-man plumber shop.
Yeah.
And one of those businesses that they had a lot of vision for was an artisan business, because they had met this talented young couple, Jalia and Daniel, who were talented, smart, but extremely poor and just didn't have access to a marketplace. And on that trip to Uganda, they had said, Jessica, would you sell some of these items? Would you ever think about starting a marketplace for them? And I laughed them off. In my head, I was like, are you kidding me? My plate's full.
Yeah.
I'm doing real estate. I've got 2 kids. I've got another one on the way. But fast forward, and I felt like courage really cornered me.
Yeah.
I mean, who wants to be broke? I mean, no one, it was a really, really desperate time for us, filled with a lot of anxiety. I remember specifically this one deal that was supposed to close, and it was going to be what we were going to live off of for 3 or 4 months. And I mean, it wasn't that much money anyway that we were going to get. And I remember my husband calling me and saying, she decided not to buy the house because she's worried about the economy. And
And that was a hard time for just about everybody, but certainly in real estate, particularly hard hit. And I think it's important to pause for a second and just like acknowledge that I feel like sometimes people think that entrepreneurs always, like you had an idea and you had extra money lying around and that sort of thing. And so like, yeah, I'll just do my idea. But more often than not, it's somebody who's solving a particular problem that you're facing, and it's not always out of abundance. Sometimes it's out of scarcity, but there's nothing that motivates you like that kind of hunger or desperation. You're like, no, I have to do this, and I don't have another way to get there, and that's the thing that can kind of drive you through some really difficult times.
Yeah, I think actually limited resources and boundaries promote even more creativity.
Yeah.
Because you're solving a problem always with a certain amount of resources that you have available. And certainly you don't, I see this all the time with the artisans that we work with. I'll travel to Guatemala and they're using little combs as ways to set up small weaving contraptions to weave some of the accessories that we purchase from them. Or they're using a corn husk for their spool of thread. And I just see that sometimes it's that when you're in that place of feeling limited, that you actually are able to be even more creative.
I feel like I think that's a great point. Like there's a scrappiness there for sure, but it also has an unlikely benefit where, they refer to the flip side as the paradox of choice, where you have infinite possibilities. What if you don't have infinite possibilities? It actually forces you to make decisions faster, because instead of this theoretical, I could do 1,000 different things, you look and you got, well, I have a comb on the floor and I have something else and I need to solve a problem.
Right.
So let's just do something.
Let's just do it.
Yeah.
So that was definitely the spirit. So I think it was after I got that phone call, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like we don't have any money, and we didn't feel like stopping our adoption process. And I recalled that conversation that I'd had just a few months prior in Uganda, and I texted my friends and I said, can I sell that product after all?
Yeah.
And I went, and it was just sitting in storage, all of this product. So they were trying to solve this problem around economic empowerment for some of the Ugandans they were working with, and they spotted this talented, Ugandan couple that made beautiful things, but they hadn't thought through the marketplace part, which is often the most challenging part, is creating a brand that people are attracted to and they want to purchase. So I dusted off the goods and I invited a bunch of women into my home, thinking it was just going to be maybe a one-night fundraiser.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a label for that at the time? And again, now we think that's a trunk show, right? But was that a thing, or did you feel like you're winging all of this?
I definitely was winging that night. I was also selling my grandma's dishes. I was selling my clothes.
It's all.
It was, if you wanted to buy it, you could buy it that night.
Right.
Yeah, you could have it for sure. But yet we were still trying to make it as realtors. And so I remember that the day arrived where I had invited all these women in my home, and suddenly I was thinking, this is the dumbest idea ever, because I'm going to be perceived as desperate, as a failure. People are going to question how we're growing our family. And if we can't even afford to adopt, then why are we actually even considering a third child?
That's a really vulnerable place.
It was very vulnerable, and I wanted to call it all off. I thought, you know what? Never mind, scratch this. And that's really when I learned what courage was. I had always equated courage with Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and these amazing heroes.
Right.
I would have never used the word courage to describe myself.
Yeah.
But what I realized is that courage was being afraid and just going ahead anyway. So I was ultimately afraid of what other people were going to think.
Yeah.
But was I going to let that stop me from getting these initial funds that could help fund our adoption? So I didn't cancel.
And that's awesome. And by the way, like a little interjection here, Martin Luther King actually talks about he got nervous every time he stood up to speak.
Yes.
Right. So like, and that's part of it is you just keep going.
Yes. And I think that we see there are some people who maybe aren't that afraid, but I think we assume that leaders or successful people never get afraid, and that's just not true.
It's not true for almost everybody, yeah.
So I think what leaders and successful people have done is learn to make fear their friend, and that was really, that night was the beginning of my relationship with fear, my new relationship with fear, where I realized I can make this my friend.
Channel it a little bit.
I could channel it, yeah. So I didn't call it off, and so many people came, and they loved the product. There was this one necklace that sold out, and I had friends say, well, I would love to get more of that. So it really was the next day when I woke up, and I thought, you know what, there is a hole in the marketplace where in this model of direct sales, so many friends had tried to talk me into selling for their direct sales company, and it had never appealed to me simply because I didn't just love the product and maybe I didn't see the purpose behind it. So I just thought, I bet there's other women out there like me who would love to open their homes or host a party with a purpose. So pretty much I texted my friends back in Uganda and I said, can I get more product? And they said, yes, we'll get you in touch with Jolly and Daniel. And Jolly and Daniel didn't have a computer at the time. They were house sitting people's homes. I mean, they didn't have a home. They had 2 kids that weren't in school. They were extremely poor, and come to find out later, they didn't really know what to do. I was asking them to make these certain necklace styles, and they had no idea how to do it. And they didn't tell me that. They're like, yeah, absolutely. We'll deliver you, 20 necklaces next week.
They weren't even sure what you were asking for.
No, but they're so entrepreneurial and they're going to make it happen. So we really, grew one another's businesses. 9 years later, Jolly and Daniel now have 100 full-time employees and would definitely get voted best place to work in Uganda. They have a daycare and a scholarship program and celebrate people's birthdays who may have never had birthday parties before. And it all started really from feeling desperate and afraid, but not letting that hold us back.
That's really cool. That's a great a great story and great lesson. Now, how did you? So you have the first party, and then you say, "All right, I think this kind of worked, and I think I want to do this. I'm going to have a second party." Did you invite the same people to the second party? Or how did you find, how did you make the switch from I'm just trying to do this one time to what if this actually were a business? How would I structure that? Am I calling the same people? Am I calling a couple of the same people and a lot of new people? How did you think through that at that time?
I didn't really think much. I just started getting on the phone and asking people if they would open up their homes and invite their friends over, because that night at my house was just maybe my circle of friends.
Right.
But these other women, they have their own circle of friends. So I just started asking women, and I thought, you know what? Remember that necklace you loved? I'll get you that necklace for free as a thank you. So there was, a little bit of an incentive for them.
Right.
They could get some free product, invite their friends over. I'm still amazed and so humbled, though, that women actually did it, because it was a scrappy thing. And, obviously we're in Austin, and I just am so grateful to have birthed a company in this town. I think that is what did launch it into such rapid success, because women are using their purchasing power for good. And so that was not just an absolute foreign concept to them.
And there's an openness to new things here.
There's
That's
an
really
openness
important.
to new things and newness. And people weren't just stuck on brands or having to carry around, a Louis Vuitton. Like people were like, oh, it's made of seeds? That's interesting. Cool. I want that.
That's right. Yeah.
So women were so open and receptive and wanting to open their homes. And then once I started going into other women's homes, and I would invite people that I didn't know at their houses. Well, hey, would you have a circle of friends? Would you like to gather up some people? And women just really wanted to do it. I mean, not everyone, but
Right.
Someone who, we started the whole podcast with this idea of a good meal. And,
Yeah.
we're going to recall a good meal, not because of the food. I mean,
It's the conversation,
it's
the
the
connection.
conversation, it's the experience. And people are looking for experiences. Experiences are what change you, or experiences are what you remember, and stories are what you remember.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was gathering people around product, but also around story. I mean, getting to share this connection with Jalia and Daniel, and let me tell you their story. And they're in Uganda, and they're trying to make it. And let me tell you about this little boy in Rwanda that we're wanting to adopt, and like you're helping with that. And so I think that this idea to harness gathering, to harness purchasing power, to harness just something bigger and beyond ourselves, all while making it fun jewelry.
Right.
It was a very potent combination that I had never come across before.
And it seemed like, so it worked well enough even in those early days that you weren't tempted to say, well, I should probably go open a 10,000 Villages store down this, kind of a retail outlet. Like you knew pretty early on that there was something powerful about these connections.
It's powerful to gather, and it's powerful to storytell. Mm-hmm. And if you just see a product at, an Anthro or whatever, you're going to pick it up, but you might never understand the story behind it. Whereas in these Noonday gatherings, you get to storytell and really help people understand the power that they have, to influence their community. I mean, by saying, hey, invite your friends over, it really helps them be the solution to the problem. And it helps people see there is a problem in the world.
Yeah.
There are people that are in these really vulnerable situations where unemployment rate is upwards to 60 and 80% in places like Uganda, Haiti, Guatemala. And so, first of all, you're painting a picture of this problem, and then you're letting the customer be the hero. Like they get to be the solution to that problem in a really fun way. Right. I have to wear those earrings.
Yeah, it's a
That's
fun
a bummer.
hero. That's right. Let's take a really short break now, and we'll be right back. The Barcode Podcast is produced by Barcode Media, where our purpose is to equip emerging consumer brands. Go to barcodestartup.com to learn more about what we do. While you're there, you can also read full transcripts of podcast episodes, as well as get additional tools to help you grow your consumer packaged goods business. Now back to the episode. So how did you know when Noonday was becoming more than just like a little side hustle? Like what were the indicators to you that like I could find myself doing this like all the time?
Yeah, I was kind of doing it all the time, even just from the get-go, because I just run fast, really hard and fast.
Once the switch was flipped in your mind.
The switch was flipped, so it wasn't like I
what
was,
real estate? I don't even remember.
Yeah, I wasn't stopping and being really deliberate, but I would say when I realized it wasn't a side hustle anymore is when I committed to partnering with a business partner. Mm-hmm. And so after about 9 months in, other women said, can I be a part of this? And I said, yes, let's come up with a compensation plan. So I quickly began to multiply myself. So other women, a woman in Seattle, someone in Nashville, they started their own Noonday Collection businesses by doing the same thing, inviting their friends over, and then their friends inviting them over.
And did you picture that from the very first day, or did that just kind of happen organically? Did people come to you saying, could I do this in my town?
I did picture the potential of multiplying myself pretty quickly from the beginning, because I thought, if this is working for me, and I know there's other women out there like me, then this could work for someone else in another geography. And so while I knew it would, and so even in building the website, which I went and pawned my grandma's gold jewelry. So like I had that first initial party, and then woke up the next day, realized, you know what? I think I can keep doing this. And I had a little bit of a business background, obviously, having worked in real estate. We already had like a corporation set up. And so I just kind of filed the new name and doing business as with the tax office in town. And then I started, importing product, which actually wasn't a big deal either. DHL and FedEx. So a lot of people are like, how did you figure out customs and all of that? And I'm like, I don't know, but the product came to me.
That's right.
And then I did realize that, so I built a website that could scale. I mean, it couldn't scale that far. So that was it.
Yeah. But it was a good start.
It was a good start. So it had that affiliate possibility so that other people could just latch on and, get all their sales through their own customer base. So that part, honestly, the beginning part felt very clear to me. It was the scaling operationally, especially, I was stuck there. We had PayPal, but PayPal wasn't talking to the shipping. I would go wait in line at the post office with boxes and boxes of jewelry for them to mail. I mean, I was getting really evil eyes at the U.S. Post Office. It's her
You're the
again.
problem. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing was so laborious, and I don't love operations. I don't love building systems. And that's where I was getting stuck. So
how long into it were you, like, how long had you been doing that when you started discovering that stuckness?
Probably 10 months in, because at this point I've multiplied myself. I have a few ambassadors at this point. I'm still going out and doing trunk shows myself. And then I'm coming home and I'm like handwriting labels, shipping labels. So and inefficiencies drive me crazy.
Right.
They really do. I just am not always the right one to figure out how to make a system more efficient.
Yeah.
So at that point, I thought, okay, I could get an angel investor. I thought an angel investor was an angel.
Just a do-gooder.
I seriously thought, okay, maybe someone could just write me a check for $60K.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
That'd be so nice.
Yeah.
I thought that's what an angel investor
I'll give you a hug. I'll give you a hug of thanks.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes.
And
it turns out they're
they kind of want
not that angelic.
They kind of want something
That's right.
in return.
That's right.
So I did. I have a little prayer request sheet that says angel investor $60K to the state. It sits on my office desk.
That's awesome.
I just began to talk to different folks. And so one of the guys that I reached out to was someone named Travis Wilson, who I think is a friend of yours. And he and I had met previously in Africa. Joe and I had been visiting Africa, and he was running a microfinance bank in Africa.
So you were mission aligned from the start.
From the get-go, mission aligned. Also had been mission aligned with my husband. He and I had met doing Food for the Hungry, where we were really wanting to serve the poor. That's what we wanted to do with our lives. So that has always just been critical from the beginning, that mission alignment. So I knew that Travis and I were mission aligned, and I kind of was reaching out to him more for help. We had exchanged children. So I would go watch his kids, and then his wife would come watch mine in order to save on babysitters.
Yeah.
So one night I was at his house while he and his wife were out on a date, and I saw this big stack of Excel spreadsheets on his dining table. And I was like, wow, I don't know what that is. That looks good.
That looks very organized.
That looks organized. It was like a budget plan. I was
systematic.
Like, whoa, this, I need to get together with Travis and like, what does he do?
Right.
I don't know what he does for a living, but it looks organized and systematic. So
it's so foreign to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
So just reached out to him, and we were mission aligned. He had never heard of this direct sales model, which honestly is a pretty old model. In the 1940s, I think Tupperware was the first company to start.
Right.
And its roots are in empowering women, which is really cool. It's one of the first job opportunities that got women out of their home in this way that was culturally appropriate.
Right.
So this trunk show model, this ambassador model, and then social impact. And we would just get together in the early mornings before he went off to his 9 to 5. And he just started asking me really good questions. What's keeping you up at night? And is this a nonprofit? Is it for profit? Just all those kind of things. So
Right.
he was just sort of
And
almost.
as you two talk through those things, like what at that point was keeping you up at night? And then
gosh.
had you thought through some of those nonprofit, for-profit things? Where was your mind at in that moment as you guys were kind of charting the course for what it would become?
I had a lot of clarity around what it was in that first year, and it's scaled, but the heart of it actually hasn't changed. So it's truly about empowering women here, because I had lived overseas. My husband and I had met through Food for the Hungry, and I had experienced a lot of purpose and passion. And then when we moved back to America, we both floundered for a while, and just, real estate, it was fine, but it wasn't, to me, meeting some larger purpose in my life. And I really lived with a lot of angst, had some depression, just felt disconnected from my purpose. And so now with Noonday, suddenly I was on fire with my purpose. And I'm like, man, I know there's other people out there that would love to be connected to this purpose, and that need an income, and that need flexibility, because I had two littles at home. And so all of those were problems that Noonday was solving for people like me.
Right.
Moms, young kids, needed income, needed purpose. And then Travis had an operational background. He had his MBA, and then also had done a small stint at Amazon and had worked in finance. He's extremely, extremely brilliant around being fiscally responsible and P&L. Like, I hadn't really done a P&L. I was like, I'm selling. I
try to sell for more than I bought it for.
That was my basic math, which honestly will get you far in this life. Because the Ubers of the world actually aren't following basic fiscal
that's exactly true.
Elementals,
It's one thing I love about product businesses.
It's true.
It's baked into the business model.
It is baked into the business model. So, I knew, okay, I'm selling like crazy. And I was being very fiscally conservative. I was buying inventory every week at this point, so I wasn't even investing much. But a lot of my pain points were around these efficiencies. And I'm like, this isn't scalable to me to stand in the line at the post office.
Right.
And, I didn't want to run finance. My husband was getting up at 4 a.m. to do, he is a very detail-oriented guy. So he is obviously really was a founder in that first year. He was doing the operational things, but he's also trying to make it as a realtor. Anyway, it was a very stressful time. So after about probably 3 times of meeting together, Travis says, hey, I've been saving up. My wife and I, our whole life, we have this nest egg in hopes that someday I could run a business or start a business. And I'm interested, in being your business partner, and I'd be ready to live salary free. We've got enough for about 14 to 18 months. And you want to
give it a go?
You want to give it a go. And that scared me to death.
Because then it wasn't just you.
No. Someone was willing to empty their life savings on this idea and this belief that this was going to be more than just a side gig.
Right.
And so that's when I had to really get serious about.
How did you process that?
It was, that really was stressful. And we met with a guy who did something called the Berkman, it's kind of like a personality profile, just kind of evaluate if we would be good business partners. And this guy was so amazing. So we both completed this evaluation, and it's kind of complex, so it definitely needs a mediator to explain it. So we were going that day to meet with him to explain it all. And just that morning, I had just had this sense of, is this the work? Like, is this my life work? Is this really what I'm meant to step into? And basically that day when we were meeting with him, I had written something down in my journal that morning, and he quoted the exact quote to me that I had quoted in my journal that morning, and said, this is the work that you're meant to do, that God's prepared in advance for you to do. And so that kind of had my attention.
Yeah.
And I just realized he said, Jessica, you'll take risks, but you want them to know that they're going to be 100% successful. Like, that's an oxymoron.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that a risk? And so I think I just had to let go and just embrace that I can't 100% predict the outcome.
Right.
I don't 100% know how this is going to go. And I had to just surrender the responsibility I felt for the salary for Travis and his family. And that was a lot of my fear. Again, it was that fear. Am I going to let this fear of failure? Because I really didn't have a failure at the beginning. I was just doing.
Right, because it was you too. You're go, and it's like, well, if I screw up, it hurts me, hurts my family.
Reputation a little bit.
There aren't other people depending on me in this way. Yeah.
So when someone linked their success to my success, which is interesting because Jolly and Daniel had already done that. They had linked their success to my success. And in a sense, I had linked my success to their success.
Sure.
Because if they
didn't deliver,
then I would have unhappy customers.
That's right.
So this whole idea of linked success and linked prosperity is what's really helped me to move forward in my scaling the business. Because when it's not just about you and you do have stakeholders and you're leaning into one another, there is an accountability that just builds in. And, I think entrepreneurs are known as starters, and we like to fly the coop when things get hard or unfigureoutable or whatever.
Yeah.
And I have had definitely those urges over the years. And
because as you grow, again, when you haven't done it, you think when we get bigger, it's going to be easier because I'll have more money.
I think that has been my lesson this year. What I've been determined to let go of this year is that there is no point of arrival.
No.
That is the biggest myth that is just stumps me. Like it keeps me from living in the present, because I have believed there is a silver bullet that we're finally going to press. And that silver bullet will create, I don't know, billions of dollars of success, whatever I'm defining success as.
Right.
And then I will have arrived to this point of success where then blank, I don't know what. I'm like, why? I don't know what I tie to that myth of that there's a point of arrival. I even had this moment yesterday where, because Kendra Scott is another Austin company, and they have scaled to be,
tremendous success,
huge $1 billion valuation.
Right.
And I had this realization. I thought, you know what? Kendra Scott woke up this morning. I bet she had a lot of stresses. I bet she was stressed out about how are we going to grow this next year? What's our strategic growth plan? And it just brought me a little solace because,
because there's a lot of zeros. There's even more people dependent on what you're doing.
There are.
And you never get past that.
You never really get to escape that. So this year for me has been about settling in for the journey and realizing that maybe the destination is the journey.
Right.
And I need to quit going after some destination that I think will then lead me to like a life of no stress and glory and unicorns and rainbows.
Yeah, the grass is always greener. Around the corner next year and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, so I think that was really cool. Like you obviously recognized in Travis a personality and a set of skills and gifts that you felt like were complementary to your own, that would unlock your ability to do what you do really well. So do you feel like at that point, were you self-aware enough that you knew how you needed to be focusing your time based on what you're really good at?
I knew where I needed to not focus my time.
Right, like get me out of Excel and out of QuickBooks, and that's where,
Yes. That's always been more clear to me. Like, okay, I know I don't like doing that, and that could ultimately lead to the failure of the
Right,
company.
right. Yeah.
And, he really had that foresight to scale our operations. I remember in the early days, I think our first really big investment was in our accounting software, NetSuite. It was like a $40,000.
It's expensive.
It was. And, this was maybe we weren't paying ourselves a salary yet, I don't think, by the time we were about to make that investment. And, as a marketing and salesperson, I'm like, are you kidding me? You know what I could do with that?
That's right.
And yet, to this day, we still run everything off of NetSuite. Now it talks to our shipping. We've been able to scale. So
you built out the infrastructure in anticipation of the growth, because if you hadn't done that, you would have grown, and it would have been really, really painful to try to build systems, kind of build the plane while you're flying it.
Yes, I met with an entrepreneur yesterday, and I mean, she's had her business for a few years, and she's just now figuring out her P&L and getting her books in order. And she's like, I just realized I owe taxes that I haven't been paying.
Yeah.
She's like, I just had to write a $20,000 check.
Yeah, the government's not cool with that.
That's not going to fly over here in the good old USA. So
That's right.
it flies in some of the other places where we work, but not,
That's
not
right,
the USA.
yeah.
So anyway, I think that all of those things I knew I valued as important. I just didn't want to have to be the one to figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really cool. So you knew in those early days, you recognized that in order to realize the vision that you had very clearly from the early days of Noonday, that you needed Travis and his skills and his vision for how to build out the infrastructure that would kind of get you to that mountaintop. Now, once he came on board and you're now able to focus on some slightly different things, how did that, in that moment, like in the growth trajectory of Noonday, how did you begin to like utilize your time, right? Were you at that point, were you starting to take trips to visit artisans? How were you finding at that point, were you starting to say, we need to develop new artisan partners, and how do we find these people?
Yeah, definitely sourcing for sure. So I started to travel more, and, I took my first trip to Guatemala after Travis came on to go and find weavers.
Mm-hmm. And how do you find them? Would you just like go to a village and say, hey, who's the best weaver here?
I did do that. I'd lived in Guatemala before. Mm-hmm. There is another woman who is she's been a consultant with us, and her whole career has been in artisan goods. So she had a few names of people for me to call when I arrived to Guatemala. But it was pretty crazy. I mean, I arrived and then kind of started calling a couple of people that she gave me their numbers. Yeah. And this one woman, I found this woman, Anna, because I loved her. She had a little store in a village that you had to take a bus and then a boat and then a tuk-tuk to get to.
Nice.
And I loved her things and met her and followed up on the other side. I mean, now she just built a whole workshop, and she's employing like 45 women in her community. Scaling that, and then ambassador training, so sales training. So I was doing a lot of the training, writing training. Here's how to get other women to gather. Here's how to find other ambassadors. So,
and were you interviewing a lot of those ambassadors to say, kind of like what's working for you, and like how are you discovering the right way to build that program? Was it all gut?
I wasn't. I actually, the first at least year and a half, I interviewed ambassadors to even see if they could join. So they had to create it was like a whole style board, because I wanted to see if they could style. Mm-hmm. They had to give me a list of people.
You weren't just taking anybody off the street.
No,
yeah, you were choosy.
I was interviewing, and that led to this. But then during the interview process, I would say, listen, this is sink or swim. I'm really not going to do anything for you. Can you just go be a go-getter?
I'm really engaged right now, and I'm going to be doing some other stuff.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it was
Right.
just, it was about, that was part of the interview process, was like, describe a time where you've been a pioneer, and are you a pioneer? So I really leaned into that entrepreneurial spirit and attracted some amazing entrepreneurial women that were really purpose-driven.
Well, and that's hugely important, though, that you recognize that, because, like, if you're busy building your business and doing a lot of other things, you weren't going to be around. Certainly, if they were spread out geographically, you weren't going to be around to babysit and handhold.
There was not
and so
hand-holding.
you needed to find the people who could kind of maintain motivation,
Yeah.
even in your absence.
Yeah. So they were those kind of outliers, because now we've grown so big, and thankfully we attract a wide variety of women, and we have our outliers that can just leave me alone. I'm going to go do my thing. But now we do a lot more hand holding.
Right,
we have a
right.
lot more systems set up, and that's really gratifying. I mean, I got a card this week from a husband of an ambassador, and he said, "I don't know you, but I just need you to know what I've seen in my wife since she started this business 2 years ago. She's a different person. She's found her passion. She's been able to help our family. Thank you so much for starting this." And
That's really cool.
Super humbling.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now one thing that you do that I think is probably, and again, I don't pretend to be an expert at this, but I assume is pretty unique, is that you are actually working collaboratively with your artisan partners on the design end of things, right? So it's not that you just have people here in the U.S. who are sketching things, and then you're just sending it off to a factory and say, make this and make a lot of it, right? Yeah, that's not really the model that you guys have followed. How do you kind of do that collaborative, creative process together across a lot of different cultures and other boundaries?
Yeah, it's been really fun just to see how the artisans have evolved over time, because at the beginning, when I would talk about, our spring fashion season and our fall fashion season, I mean, a lot of these countries don't have falls.
Right.
Guatemala is known as the land of eternal spring. So they're
That's
like,
right.
what are you talking about? And how colors change and trends. And so now we have a really refined process where we have a kickoff where our designers do send trend boards and color stories and just some initial ideas. And then artisans will then send ideas back to us, like, well, here's this new technique that we've tried, or here's a new material that we've discovered, or a combination of materials. And then that kind of gives us some initial ideas. And then we do begin to design, and then we will send sketches over to our artisan partners, and then they will kind of take those as an input, and they might change something based on a skill set that they have, or on a better material that they think is available. Or a lot of times artisans now will actually just send us items that they've designed and say, hey, will any of these fit into your upcoming buys? Which that used to never happen.
Yeah.
But now they have this skill set.
They have the confidence
They
too.
do.
Yeah.
They do. So it's a collaborative process, and it's extremely gratifying to see how much they've grown in their own being able to design for a Western marketplace.
How did you, I guess, sort of develop the Noonday style? Right. So obviously it evolves and it changes with the seasons and the years, but certainly you also want to have there's a coherence across collections, even though they're made in all these different different geographies and cultures, and I can see, I know, Macy was wearing a Noonday necklace, and my wife Amy was like, "Oh, is that a Noonday necklace?" And she knew it off she recognized it. And so how do you think about having that begin, because you don't get to have it's not like a Noonday logo, right? So but there's a certain style that you've created that has a lot of variation. How do you do that?
Well, I do think that the materials and the handmade nature of our products sets the style in that way, where there's something organic about the materials that we work with, and handmade means we're imperfect by design. And that means there's going to be variations between one necklace might not be exactly like the next necklace. And working with natural materials like horn or paper or seeds or upcycled artillery. So in that way, I'm glad that I know I struggle with this because it doesn't always look cohesive to me.
Right.
Because it does come from, and like so jewelry companies is usually like, here's our standard color of gold that we're using. Here's our standard clasps. I mean, everything is so
well, you think
standardized.
about, again, a couple of other Austin area, James Avery and Kendra Scott have a very distinctive style, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
and their clasps are going to be the same and their earring backs are going to be the same. But we're getting from people all over the world, and so there isn't that. But I would say our style really is it's handmade, and it's for the woman who isn't afraid to take a risk and who wants to be globally connected. There is often a little bit of a global element to our pieces. But I would say just there's something soulful. It's a soulful style.
Yeah, that's really good. So on the global connection front, you'd mentioned earlier that you're really passionate about storytelling, and so you and your team have done a really good job of telling stories. And those stories are of your artisan partners and the workers there. They are stories of ambassadors and that sort of thing. How do you manage? Like, how do you decide? I'm going to go on a trip. Again, you're a busy. You're a mom. You're running a company. How do you do all that? How do you go? If it's Uganda or Indonesia or wherever you've got to go to develop these relationships, tell these stories, bring people along. How does that work?
Yeah, well, we have a product team now that one of our production managers used to live in Rwanda, and we have our VP of product is Filipina. So we have a global team that is now working with our artisan partners and helping them to scale their businesses, making sure their P&L is in a good place, all the things that we're committed to as a fair trade business, as a B Corp.
Right.
Where, we actually finance when we place our purchase orders. And since I know this is a consumer goods crowd that listens to your podcast, we'll pay at least 50% upon placement of the PO. Up front, so that the artisans have money to purchase raw materials.
That's right.
And, all of these things.
Because they don't, in many of these countries, they may not have access to lending institutions that are viable, right?
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Or they're like 38% interest.
That's right.
Crazy.
Right.
So in a sense, we're a microbank.
Yeah.
To our artisan partners. And, we have a commitment to long-term partnership. And that is what makes us different than maybe if you're shopping at a traditional retail and you might see, oh, look, that's made in Rwanda, but you might never see that again at that store.
Right.
Whereas we're committed to growing partnerships over time. That really acts as a constraint to us because we are always looking to balance that supply chain, but we're a market-driven company. But we're always trying to balance impact with the market. So we always know that we need some fun pieces like Vogue today just put our really cool chic wrapping paper on their website today.
Yeah.
And but the wrapping paper hasn't been the best seller at a trunk show because wrapping paper is harder to sell. It's a weird size in a trunk show gathering. It's just not really what you expect. So, but we know we have to have those things that are going to be editorial, that might not be huge unit drivers, but we want our huge unit drivers to be balanced among all of our artisan partners. So if we have a strong editorial piece, we know we're not going to be able to buy much of, that's not going to make much of an impact, then we want to make sure that group then has a strong unit driver.
Right. Because if your goal is to make an impact in among among all these communities, you have to have a reliable supply of goods, and you can't have a reliable supply of goods if your artisan partners are out of business, right? And then like moreover, like you can only make so big of an impact if you buy 1 million units from somebody today and you say, well, I'm never going to order anything else, right? Then that's you can't actually have a viable business in that way, because then they're just going to evaporate.
Yeah, and I mean, I've even, being out in the field, heard of these stories where maybe a big retailer does place some unheard of order with an artisan business, and they will go and build a new workshop and do all of this work to scale just so that they can actually fulfill that order, and then they never see the order again.
Yeah.
So
that can happen. That honestly, that happens in almost every consumer packaged goods
really?
sector. Yeah, like with food and beverage and things like that.
Right, because you're sourcing.
That's
from
right.
people.
Yeah, and you say, oh, I got into this big retailer. That's very exciting. But if they only order one time, then that actually didn't help you very much.
Right.
Or if there's a lot of lumpiness in that, as well.
So consistency, obviously, is what our artisan partners are always, if we can just provide consistency, consistent orders.
And you guys even list out, I've seen like your impact journal that you publish on your website. You're actually taking pride in the duration of your relationships with these artisan partners, right? That you're like, hey, we've been working with these people consistently for 5 years, 6 years, 9 years. Yeah.
Really proud of that. And again, that also is just this lesson I'm learning of, it's about the journey, not the destination, and really partnering with people over a long period of time. And our partnerships are so strong. And of course, we've gone through lean times. And of course, we've over inventoried and ordered too much of this, or we thought something was going to be a best seller and it wasn't. And so then
because you can't always predict it right.
It's an art, not a science. I mean, there's certainly a lot more science to it than I realized.
That's right, yeah.
Actually, that was one of our first hires, was an inventory planner. And it's funny because Travis and I don't have a retail background. He did a small internship at Amazon, but we hired this consultant from the very beginning, which was another crazy story where a photographer was sharing an office with us, and I was like, I need a merchandising consultant. And this photographer was like, I have a friend who's a merchandising consultant. I was like, oh, that's a thing?
I didn't know that was a thing.
Really?
Yeah, right.
And so we hired this consultant, and she said, you have to hire an inventory planner. So that was one of our first hires. We didn't even know that was a job.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Like, really? There's someone all day who's just planning out inventory and,
Yeah, you couldn't even compute that. You're
now we have two. We actually have 2.5 inventory planners now.
Yeah.
And that was a crucial decision that we made that was so good.
Because otherwise you would have just been stuck with a lot of things, or you would have been out of stock in all kinds of things.
Yeah, or
and
you're
missed
not buying right, missed
Yeah.
opportunities. So it is interesting how it can be a scientific process to predict the future of what people are going to buy. But it's not 100% foolproof.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So it's challenging. And when, we have buys, I don't know if consumer packaged goods, if you have these buy meetings where it's like, okay, we are now deciding on our inventory for the next season.
Sure.
And I'm sure you do these taste tests and all of those things. So we have these big meetings, and, it's not like a typical buy meeting where you go in and you're like, I think that's going to sell, love that color, that's a great fit, customer love. But it's like, okay, well, who makes this? Okay, well, if we're going to buy this from Uganda, then that's going to be a high unit driver. Let's look at Guatemala now. And scarves are downtrending. Okay, well, scarves are downtrending Guatemala. Well, what else can we get them to make aside from scarves so that they can have a consistent order? I mean, it's a lot of problem solving.
Yeah.
It is.
How do you, again, one of I think the impetus behind a lot of fair trade and things like that were, back in the 90s and early 2000s, when all these news stories would come out about sweatshops and stuff like that. And then you're partnering with this global network of artisan partners, and I think there's maybe a caricature of like these Americans kind of swoop in and say have their photo ops and give high fives to people. How do you make sure that you're developing like genuine collaborative relationships that are truly empowering for women and workers, even when you're not there.
Right. I mean, we do have internal audits that we do, and we have a shared understanding of what our 4 or 5 principles of fair trade, sort of how we operate with our artisan business partners. And, we have them do surveys, and we visit at least once a month. Someone on our product team is out visiting. But again, I think it is about that longevity. And I think when you're working with people over time, you're able to really see the integrity. And it's really making sure there's integrity at the top, because especially in so many of the countries where we work, it's that leadership that's been a missing gap oftentimes, where it's expected that leaders would exploit or not pay on time. So it's not like we have these outside auditors coming in to constantly audit us, though we are a part of the Fair Trade Federation and the B Corporation, but it really is having a shared understanding of values and of mission with the leaders at the top.
But there's also, that's exactly right. But there's also these, cultural norms can be different, right? So there's certain cultures where bribery is it's not poo-pooed, it's expected, right? And so you're having to navigate a lot of really complex intercultural issues when you're working across the globe.
Yeah, we are. It is never a dull day at work.
So how do you? So I want you to imagine if you're talking to and our listeners, a lot of our listeners are in the early-ish stages of growing their own brands and companies and things like that. If you could transport yourself back to the early days, kind of in the Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure time machine, what's some of the advice that you would give to younger Jessica that would have, not necessarily because, again, like the journey happens for all kinds of reasons, but that you say, hey, really focus on this and ignore that.
I definitely, as much as I knew what my weaknesses were, and I quickly latched onto a business partner who could compensate for that, I still failed to walk in a lot of confidence in what I did have to bring. So I think I spent more time feeling like I should shore up these other areas instead of really just finding that sweet spot. I think, we talk a lot about scaling operations, but there's also scaling our mindsets as you grow and being able to have that growth mindset, being able to understand that, you're going to make some mistakes along the way. That was really hard for me. I just wanted it to be like you press the button and you take off.
Do you feel like is that unique to you? I'm more of a perfectionist, or do you feel like is that a common struggle for a lot of the women that you're close to, where you feel like it's on your shoulders you've got to do it all and you've got to do it well?
I can't speak for all women. I can say that studies have shown that, the Atlantic did a study at HP that when women were applying for a promotion, they felt like they had to be 100% competent before they applied, whereas the men didn't it was like care. 40%. Like, I'm just going to go for it.
I'll just wing it. Yeah,
I'll just wing it. So there is a sense where women just haven't really stepped into the fullness of our confidence, and we can get stuck in comparison, but comparing our weaknesses to our strengths, comparing to one another. So I did spend some energy in those first few years around a mindset that I wish if I could go back in time, and it robbed me of a lot of the joy and a lot of the good things that was happening along the way. And then, I was raising a young family at the time and still am. And so just the whole idea that I could be a good CEO and be a good mom, that I didn't really embrace that truth until maybe 3 or 4 years in. And so I know that just robbed me of presence.
What was the mindset shift that allowed you to imagine a world where you could be a great CEO and a great mom?
I realized I had this formula that was perfect parenting and perfect kids out. that's not actually
Yeah,
real.
it doesn't work so well.
Does it?
That's right, yeah.
First of all, there is no perfect parenting. You're going to screw
Or
it up.
perfect kid, yeah.
And, no matter what good a job you can do, your kids could still end up in jail at age 30.
Right.
So I think it was just letting go. It was letting go, and it was realizing I could influence an outcome, but I couldn't absolutely control an outcome.
Yeah.
So I could just do the best I can with what I have and love and bring presence, and that there could be paradox. It's this whole idea of that I used to, like, when I'd go off to fashion events in New York, I wouldn't want to tell people I was from Texas. Because I'm like, well, fashion people come from LA.
That's right.
They don't come from
Yeah. I'm kind of
Boston.
country.
Yeah, I'm country. I'm country. So there's this whole idea of just embracing and being
Your
fully
identity, too.
confident in all the different parts of my life, that I could wear lipstick and statement earrings at a CEO event that might be primarily men.
Right.
And I could be from Texas when I am going and meeting with the Vogue editor like I did last month.
Right.
And I can be not always show up at my kids' soccer game because you're there to coach my kids' soccer, which is awesome because I have to travel, but that doesn't make me a bad mom.
Right.
So it's like reconciling all these different facets of my life and realizing that they weren't contradictory, but they could live in that place of and.
Right. And that you're modeling certain things for your kids too, that you're, in the same way that you hope that they will discover their passions and pursue them, that we have our passions and pursue those too.
Absolutely.
That's really cool. So what does success look like for you and for Noonday at this point? Like, how do you, again, because theoretically it could just it keeps going and going and going, and there's you never reach the summit. There's always another summit. How are you present in that?
We do have an audacious vision to build a flourishing world where women are empowered and where children are cherished and where people have dignified jobs and where we are all connected. And we define flourishing as where can humans be fully able to express their humanness. And I think often when you think about social impact, we often talk about the poor in terms of getting them to this baseline, like, oh, they can send their kids to school now, or they have a safe place to live. Flourishing is a child graduating from high school and you have enough to be able to throw a graduation party.
Yeah.
Flourishing is a husband being able to buy his wife an anniversary gift, which Jalia and Daniel was able to buy a gift for his wife on her anniversary 2 years into their business. These are the moments that create humanness for people. And there is still so much flourishing that we want to see happen, even among our current business partners. And then there's honestly so many people that are still stuck in unemployment. There's people stuck in human trafficking. And our mission of really being able to create economic opportunity in vulnerable places, I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface.
Sure.
And we really aren't a household brand yet. And when I think about women across America, I mean, there's only 2,000 Noonday Collection ambassadors. And, I got that note this week from this husband who said, I wish you could know how much this has changed my wife. And, last week I was at a Noonday trunk show, at a Noonday gathering, and I was there to support this ambassador, and her best friend pulled me inside and said, she's come alive. She's finally found herself since starting as a Noonday Collection ambassador. And that idea that we can connect people to their purpose while helping them earn an income, and just it creates freedom for them. It creates freedom for people living in these vulnerable communities. That is our mission. And we want to scale that in a way that we haven't yet hit that place of scale.
Yeah. Scale.
Yeah, we've
Not just scale.
scaled, but I'm talking about scale.
That's right. Right.
About Kendra Scott scale.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And again, once you get to that, there's always more scale.
And maybe there
right?
will
Yeah.
be, but because of our mission, we have the infrastructure, we have the culture, we have the brand, and that's what we want to see happen.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I think that clearly you've integrated the mission. And, I think for a lot of brands, they say, well, I need to have a mission because I read somewhere in a book or a blog post that that's a thing that a brand should do. And so does that mean I need to give some money to a nonprofit or something like that? And instead, obviously for you, it's woven into the very fabric, no pun intended, of the business, and it's at a micro scale, right? So you're present with your ambassadors and your partners and the workers there. But then there's this broader vision of how do we enable flourishing across these communities, not just in our, in Texas or in Seattle or wherever it is, but in villages in Guatemala and other places.
Yeah.
So I think that one part of your story, Jessica, that's really powerful is how you, and again, I appreciate your honesty and candor and vulnerability around fear, because I think that we hear a lot of stories and a lot of successful entrepreneurs like yourself, and we assume that they've conquered it, right? And certainly you want to channel it and conquer it in some ways, but it stays with you. You carry it with you. And I feel like the way these moments in your story along the way where you were able to recognize the fear and then address it and channel it in ways that were positive and productive, and ultimately, led you to bring on a business partner and led you to do some things maybe differently than you would have done if you were acting out of fear. And it's kind of like with bullies, where you assume, like, oh, somebody's a bully. And so you're like, no, they're a bully because they've been hurt, or they're a bully because they have fear, or whatever the thing is. And so, like, when we're comfortable in our own skin as a human, as a woman or a man, as a business leader, whatever those things are, as a Texan who wears, makeup to meetings, or whatever the thing is, like, then we can kind of operate. First of all, you see things more clearly, and then you can operate in your strengths in ways that end up being very, I think, very powerful and productive, not just for yourself, but for your family and for your employees and your partners.
Yeah.
So, I want to thank you again. Like, I think you've given me and our listening audience a tremendous amount to think about, to chew on, about kind of your concept of linked success, and that you can't be. It's not just about you being successful as a business. If your partners aren't successful, then it really limits your success. And if your ambassadors aren't successful, then how successful really were you? And are you causing this broader, not just financial success, but flourishing and these moments and opportunities? And I think that whatever our listeners' businesses or projects or wherever they're at, there's always some interesting ways to translate that to their own context and their own journey. And so I appreciate you giving us all of that great food for thought.
Absolutely.
So just as we wrap up here, I just want to remind our listeners that if you want to learn more, please visit barcodestartup.com/podcast. You can read the show notes there, and we'll have links to any people and companies that we mentioned in our conversation today. And again, a reminder, please share, rate, and review the Barcode Podcast so that your friends and your coworkers and colleagues can learn alongside you from these powerful stories like Jessica's. And so thanks again for listening to the Barcode Podcast, and we'll see you next week.